Hello, everyone. Welcome back to DJandtheZooms. I am Jay, and ye freaking haw, my guys. So this past weekend was the Austin, Texas Grand Prix, and it was a Sprint Grand Prix, and you know what I'm going to say, because I say it every time. I don't like sprints. And guess what? Um, a little something happened during the sprint. You may remember. I had a friend over. I have a friend who comes over most of the Grand Prix, for most of the Grand Prix to watch them with me. And she couldn't be there for the Grand Prix this weekend, so she decided to come by for the sprint. And I told her, you'll see, sprints are usually pretty uneventful. It happens too fast. It's 19 laps. And it goes really quick. You don't really have time to see anything. And they're usually all they try to stay safe because they know that they have the rest of the weekend to do with that same car. Well, obviously Formula One had to prove me wrong. And with one of those turn one crashes that I was about to say that we like to see when it's not the driver that we support that is involved. But honestly, I don't like to see a car airborne anyway whatsoever. It's too scary. You know, we've talked about this. I think safety has to be the most important thing in the sport. And anything that is dangerous, it's difficult for me to enjoy it. It was very quickly obvious that none of them were harmed. So that was it. But it's always a little scary. And obviously, okay, if I'm really honest, it did make me cackle a little bit because it's been all about, can Lando bridge the gap between Oscar and himself? And can he maybe even catch up and get in front of Oscar and win the championship? And lately, we've been wondering if Max could come back into play. And I think we mentioned it last week, last episode and last Grand Prix. Max cannot be counted out ever, unless it's mathematically impossible for him to have enough points to win a championship. You should always keep Max in mind. He's always capable of anything. I think he's the best driver of his generation. And I don't think it's a controversial opinion. It shouldn't be, because it's pretty obvious. And what happened in turn one of this sprint was someone, who shall remain nameless, was a little overambitious when trying to get into a little gap that would obviously close up very quickly, may or may not have caused a collision. Okay, listen, if you look at the video from every angle possible, it's pretty obvious that Nico Hülkenberg ends up in a Alonso and Oscar sandwich. There's nowhere Nico can go. And then Alonso bumps into him and he bumps into Oscar, who ricochets onto Lando. Alonso, Oscar, and Lando are taken out right then and there. Turn one, lap one. Obviously, I'm not going to lie to you. If Lando DNFs, I would much rather have Oscar DNF as well, because then they can't take points off each other. But what does that mean? It means that Max, who qualified on pole for both instances this weekend, for the sprint and for the race, which in and of itself is a feat that has to be talked about, and we'll come back to that, Max was able to go on with his sprint unencumbered. And it's only 8 points, but it is 8 points. And then Max went on to win the race, which is 25 points. So I think it's becoming increasingly obvious that Max is here to win it, which we should never have doubted. He has a real chance of doing it. Now, I started the episode by saying that you know what I'm going to say. and the fact that I don't like sprints. I don't like sprints because usually they're not very eventful. They don't bring much entertainment, which wasn't the case this weekend. It was very entertaining. A lot happened in those very short 19 laps. But we're coming back to the fact that there weren't only the 3 cars that we just mentioned, Alonso, Oscar, and Lando, that DNF'd. There was also Esteban and Lance, the 2 besties. That means that for Aston Martin and McLaren garages, it added a lot of work for the mechanics, which is what I've talked about time and again. And I think, not only do I think sprint weekends are a lot of work for mechanics if all goes well, but if you have a crash in the sprint and then you have to hurry up to fix the car for qualifying, and it has to be in top shape for qualifying, because that's the moment when you have to get everything you can out of the car, I'm sure it's exhausting, and especially in 30-degree heat as it was in Austin, and especially with 24 weekends a year. But I've said it. It's probably not the last time I say it, especially since I'm getting pretty exhausted with this season. And I know it has to do mostly with what's going on in my private life, but it is I feel like it's a very long season. I'm sure I'm not the only one who feels it. And someone who I think is feeling it at the moment is Oscar Piastri. We've been hearing everywhere lately that since Baku and his crash on lap 1, Oscar hasn't been the same in this second part of the season. While that makes sense and is probably very true, I think I remember Oscar not being as much on top of his game at the end of the season last year as well. I think it makes a lot of sense. He's still very young. It's only his 3rd season in Formula One, and the pressure, the tiredness, the exhaustion, the mental load, I'm sure, as the season goes on, I'm sure that your brain and your body, your nervous system accumulates everything that's happened and everything that you still have to keep in mind for the rest of the season, especially with papaya rules and team orders and repercussions, which is also something we need to talk about today, although I'm not sure I'm going to get really deep into it. Otherwise, this podcast episode is not going to be listenable. But what I'm saying is I understand that it's tough and tougher for Oscar as we get further and further into the season. And I'm not completely surprised, because there's something I think we need to keep in mind, that between fandoms, as in groups of fan of each drivers, and the media, something sort of comes to life that is a sort of mob mentality, where everyone has the same, I don't know if it's the same opinions fed to them, or if because you hear it again and again and again and again, you start to believe it. But people have been saying that Oscar is some sort of new Iceman who is cold and calculated, calm all the time, in the context of being fed this opinion. No one has stopped to really pay attention to him and see whether that was true or not. It seems very obvious to me that it's not exactly true. As in, maybe he doesn't show much emotion, but he definitely feels them. And if he feels them, he's as much at risk as anyone of succumbing to them. Pressure, fear, nerves. He himself has said this weekend that getting closer to the end of the season, being the leader of the championship, does add more pressure as you start to realize that you might win this, but also that there are 19 other people behind you trying as hard as they can to keep you from it. And then you've got weather conditions, bad night's sleep, maybe a little head cold, and maybe another driver accidentally bumping into you. All of this can happen, and all of this can build up on one another and create less than ideal conditions. I think Oscar is starting to feel the pressure and to struggle with it. Now, about those repercussions. Because you know me, this could not be an episode of DJandtheZooms if we didn't address whatever the bleep is going on with McLaren and the way they treat their drivers. I hope with the new regulations from next year on that I'll be able to talk about anyone else. So here's what went on. We remember that in Singapore, Lando bumped into Oscar slightly in the first lap. Oscar's car did not sustain any damage, but I think Oscar's confidence did. I'll just address that really quickly because I've had a lot more time to think about it since last episode, and I think this is what is going on. When Lando went for the gap, which was there, and it was a racer move, and it was what happened was deemed by the stewards and at first by McLaren to be just a racing incident, and no one in their right mind would have thought otherwise. Being bumped into sort of maybe was the last straw for Oscar to sort of crack because he'd been under so much pressure already, and being at such a level of nervousness and pressure and emotions built up and bubbling, and since he doesn't express them very much, it's understandable that when his teammate bumped into him and took the advantage over him, he spiraled a little bit. Which explains why he was so far behind Lando when there was really no concrete reason for him to be. He just sort of gave up. And then obviously there was the bad pit stop, which same thing. We've talked too much about it. We've lost too much time on it. McLaren needs to do better. There's nothing else I can do about it. Their second pit stop is consistently shit, and sorry, and they have to do better. That's real, that's true. But I don't think it explains all of why Oscar didn't try to go for it. Why is he capable of in Silverstone saying we should switch back and then try to fight it fair and square, but when he's overtaken by his teammate, he's not trying to fight it fair and square. He's not going at him. He could have. Why didn't he? I think it's because of the pressure. Also, when he said we should switch back and fight it fair and square, he was the one behind and he wanted to switch and get in front. And then Lando could fight fair and square, not Oscar. But I don't think that in particular is here or there. So there was that. And we all agreed it was a racing incident, and maybe Oscar just wasn't in the best shape, and the pit stop didn't go as well as we would have hoped. That's one race. But then they come back to the media this weekend in Austin. I'm very sorry, I'm not stopping I will keep recording in spite of the hammering. He's been at it nonstop for days. So if you hear it, you hear it. My neighbor is crazy. What was I saying? What was I saying? Yes, they come back to Austin in the media. And of course, journalists are going to ask them about it because the weekend hasn't started yet. We're still talking about what happened in the previous race. It makes sense. Lando being a little daring and overtaking Oscar and bumping into him as he did was unexpected because we've all been saying Lando's too nice and he's not daring enough and he's not aggressive enough. So it's been exciting, and so we want to talk about it. Okay, journalists talk about it to Lando and ask him if there have been repercussions after that incident or will be. And Lando says yes, and there will be repercussions to the end of the season. And everyone, all hell breaks loose. Everyone starts talking about what are the repercussions, and Zach and Andrea add that they're not going to talk about it. because it's staying within the team and we don't need to know what it is. And then you've got journalists here and journalists there saying, we know what it is, but it doesn't matter. It's not going to change much and it's not for us to say. And then, oh, we know what it is. And it is just that this is going to happen and and we know what it is. And it is the fact that Oscar will be able to choose which car goes out first for qualifying each time. But then what is it? Not the repercussions. I don't want to know what those are. I don't think they should happen. But my question is, was it a mistake or a bad move on Lando's part, which deserves to be punished, in which case he should have gotten a penalty? Or is it a racing incident? It is what it is. It's what happens when you race, in which case, what the freak are repercussions? Make it make sense. And then obviously the discourse. And this is where we come back to that mob mentality that I've been talking about, which is there is a trend online of hating on Lando and seeing anything positive that could come his way as British bias. If that same move had been made by Oscar or by Max, they would have been praised. But it's Lando, so he deserves repercussions, and that's not fair. The race was pretty quiet. I was about to say Austin isn't necessarily a track where it's particularly easy to overtake, but we've, again, been over this time and again. These cars are just too big, so no track is a track where it's easy to overtake. But then again, would it be racing if it were easy to overtake? I like Austin. I think it's a nice track. It's pretty iconic. I think it's interesting. To come back to how Oscar might be feeling the pressure, he has struggled with the car all weekend, qualified 6th in the race, only managed to get to P5. Lando qualified P2, was overtaken by Charles in the beginning of the race. There was a beautiful battle with Charles and Lando, beautiful moves happening. I love how it looks like a ballet. And then, in spite of a bad pit stop, as usual, Lando managed to get back the second position, and obviously Max was first and couldn't get to him. So Max won again. And you know what I like hearing when Max wins? My friend made this for me, and it says every Lando fan's favorite song. But I do kind of like it. I like the, I think it's become a soothing sort of melody after hearing it so much in 2023 and drawing so much joy from watching Formula One in that what was my first season watching. So I do like it when Max wins. But then Lando was P2 and Oscar was P5, which means the gap between Lando and Oscar was reduced to 14 points, and Max is coming back in the mix, as we know he does. He is now at, let me check because I'm really bad with numbers. Well, he's 40 points behind Oscar, so that's not much of a gap with 5 Grand Prix still to go and 1 sprint among them. The battle is still on and so much is happening. It's not a boring season, no matter what the haters may say. No, it's exciting. It's fun. I wish we were more considerate of the teams, as in mostly the mechanics' well-being and their health. But yeah, I stand by what I've always said. We don't need the sprints. I don't like the sprints. Do away with the sprints. Thank you for listening until the end. Don't forget to like, subscribe. You can give the thumbs up on YouTube. Share the videos, the episodes on Spotify, the posts on Instagram and TikTok. I should add the posts to TikTok now or as soon as possible. I should have been doing it since the beginning and I didn't. But please boost this podcast far and wide. And I love you. And I will see you next time. Bye.